morning.
Good morning.
For those of you who don't know, my voice has been going for the last several days. My wife's very happy about that. She didn't have to hear me. So I'm going to try to keep that voice going for the next hour. And if I talk a little bit softly, then maybe you guys could listen a little bit loudly. Last week we talked about the first part of resume writing. And that first part of resume writing was really talking about the format, the resume type, and we also talked about some of the facts surrounding the resume type. And one of the handouts that Kathy was so kind to put together was a list of the brainstormed 6 top skills and competencies. She also put a little blank space there for a specific example to remind you what I'm going to be reminding you of throughout the entire several weeks that we're together, that if you're going to brag about something being one of your key strengths, you need to make sure you have an example of that. So this is just, again, to add on to some of the things that the list that I gave you out, I handed out as part of last week's assignments. The other homework example was resume work type A. How many people filled out resume work type A? How many people didn't fill out resume work type A? Okay, you're behind. We're going to talk a little bit about the results of resume work type A. And before we go into the next step, matter of fact, today's assignment, or today's class, is really the guts of the resume. Last week's class was kind of like the frosting on the cake. But we're actually going to be making the cake. We're really talking about what things you're good at, what things you've done in the past, what things are important. So what I'd like to do is I would like to get some people to tell me, let's do it on the whiteboard. I'd like to go to page 1 of resume worksheet A and talk about professional experience. Can some folks give me some examples of what they put down for professional experience? William.
All right, I put my current job for the first one, which is working at Prudential.
What's your present company?
Prudential.
Prudential. You put Prudential. Just Prudential?
Well, that's all I could say. I practiced a full-time over
Prudential annuities.
years.
What do you put? What do you put, Prudential?
American Scandia / Prudential Security.
Yeah, I'm hearing a bunch of things. I'm hearing American Scandia, a Prudential financial company.
Just put American Scandia Prudential.
I'm just trying to give examples of what people could be putting out there. So you can put Prudential, you can put Prudential annuities, you put Prudential financial. What was yours, Mark?
American Scandia Prudential.
American Scandia / Prudential.
Yep.
So it's American Scandia / Prudential. Anyone have any other examples of what they could be putting down for the current company? Just American Scandia. Okay, so there's 6 examples, and we all work at the same company. Pretty interesting. There's no right one, there's no wrong one. I mean, the one I'm going to be using is American Scandia Prudential Financial Company. The reason I'm going to be using that is because I want the word Prudential in there. Because it's important, because a lot of the world knows what Prudential is, they don't know American Scandia. But I also want to put American Scandia in there because I think you want to be able to talk about why you don't have a job anymore, right? I work for American Scandia, but they got purchased by Prudential Financial, and when in that purchase, they consolidated, and a lot of folks in operations lost their jobs. And now I kind of have a pretty good story here. Okay, so Bill started off with Prudential because that's all he had room for.
Yes.
I don't care about city, state. I don't care. Well, dates employed. I don't. What did you use for dates employed?
Well, for this one, I just put down, since you're on us, I put 2003 to 2004.
So you worked for Prudential for 2003 to 2004. You're pretty sure.
Time to remind, yeah.
Okay. So what was the company you put before that?
For the previous company, I put American Scandia, and I put my full-time American Scandia from 2000 to 2004.
Okay, 2000 and 2003. So you put down 2 companies. Okay? How many people put down 2 companies? One for American Scandia, one for Prudential Financial? Some of you did. You know, you can do that. I would recommend it. I'd recommend putting something out like American Scandia Prudential Financial Company from 2000 to 2004, and then put in underneath that the several tasks that you had underneath that piece. Because remember, what you're trying to show I've been with the company for a period of time. I have some stability. I'm not jumping over from company to company. And if you put one down with a bunch of different things you did underneath that, it shows much more stability than if you're putting down all these little bits and pieces. Yes?
I have a question. Since I worked for Prudential previously for the relocation, how would I break that out?
When did you work for them? Before American Scandia, right?
Yeah. So there was really no break, because I worked
Right.
for Prudential, then American Scandia, now Prudential.
Well, again, if you go with this, if you go with this, it's showing a different company.
Right. Should I put the whole block from the time I started with?
No, it's two different jobs for you.
Okay.
I truly believe that's two different jobs.
Okay, so I'll break it
And
out.
plus, it kills your story. Your story is I went from Prudential, then I went and I got a new job in America. I lost this job because they relocated out to Colorado or Arizona. Then I got a job in American Scandia, and then Prudential bought us. And now again, they relocated all my positions out there. So I'm not losing my job because I'm incompetent. I'm losing my job because of circumstances. And oh, by the way, with you, who lost your job for 2 or 3 days in there, I would just,
I didn't even, yeah.
I wouldn't even address that.
I didn't.
Even if you lost your job for a couple, 3 weeks, couple months, I would just gloss right over that, baby. That's a gloss. Okay?
Lots of.
Okay, I'm going to talk about job titles. Let's talk about responsibilities. Bill, what's your responsibilities at Prudential or American Scandia Prudential Financial Company? What did you put down as your responsibilities?
Sit on conference calls all day.
But in all seriousness,
I put manage operations claims department.
let's look at it here. Manage operations, claim department,
Maintain budget,
maintain budget,
maintain a business plan,
maintain business plan,
project management,
project management,
and I also put cost reduction.
cost reduction. Now, these are, when you plan on typing these into your resume, did you plan on bulleting these, or did you plan on making it a paragraph?
Sometimes some I probably bullet, and ones I want to further, maybe that's like cost reduction or project management, I want to a little more detail as to specific things I did to show that I have project management skills and I have, either save the area, or save the company, somewhere in the cost reduction.
Okay. Anyone else want to tell me what they put down for responsibilities in theirs? Diane,
Internal and external customer service.
this is the start of what you put down?
Mhm.
So you put internal,
/ external.
external, customer service.
Mhm.
Okay. What else?
Manage department of 12.
Manage department of 12. Obviously, you're gonna spell it out. I'm just
Mhm.
gonna keep going.
Successfully manage staff to reach 97% of SMART objectives for 2 years.
To reach what?
97% of SMART objectives.
For 2 years. Okay.
Cross-train staff.
Okay.
That's about all I think I did.
Okay, anyone else want to give me theirs? Tulane, you want to give me yours? You didn't bring yours? Okay. The reason I picked on Tulane, because I actually helped hers.
Actually, it's a question. You use your job description, like American Scandia had a job description for
Yep.
my title.
Yep.
Use that job description, bullet that, and then add on whatever tasks you did beyond that. Is that just good, or?
Well, both of these are really pretty bad. They're really, I mean,
Good, because I'm not the answer.
and I love them both, but this wouldn't get me excited at all.
Well, is it because you should really be bulleting certain things?
No, it has nothing to do with format. It has nothing to do with format. I mean, again, if you go back to the 3 examples I showed you last week, okay? And again, I'm just concentrating on my resume. Remember, I told you I was a vice president, and I had a paragraph in there telling you what my responsibilities were, and then I had bullets underneath telling you what my SMART accomplishments are. So what these guys have done is they've kind of put both into one, right? This is a great, manage staff to reach 97% of SMART objectives for 2 years. Is great when you talk about what your specific results were. This wasn't your responsibilities, okay? Cross-train staff, that's not a responsibility. That's not really. Maintain budget, maintain discipline, that's really nice. But it's, and it's part of what your responsibilities were, but what I recommend,
I probably put, if you put maintain budget, I put the full amount, but again, due to space restrictions.
don't give me space restrictions. There's other blank paper in this world. I know there's other blank paper in this world. Don't give me that, William, I'll throw you out of class. What I would have started off with.
You're talking about like save the company.
No, not at all, not that at all, not that at
That's
all.
also results.
I want your responsibilities, okay? So my responsibilities, if I was Bill, okay, would start off with reporting to the vice president of Shelton operations or operations. Does that sound pretty good to you?
Very impressive.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed with Bill already. Okay? And so some of you would put reporting to the manager of imaging distribution and cash control, reporting to the manager of broker services. Okay? Now you can do either one of two things here. You can either put what you're individually responsible for, which is the best thing to put down there. But for some of you that are just part of a team, okay, you might put what your team is responsible for. So I'm gonna stick with Bill, and I'm gonna say responsible for, okay? What's Bill responsible for? Responsible for paying, he doesn't know the number right now, but XX millions of dollars of claims each calendar year. What is that, Rita? You know the number. Give me an example. Give me a possible number. How many millions of dollars are paid? Where's Rita? How many millions of dollars are paid?
4 to 5 a day.
How many? 4 to 5 a
Well,
day.
let's say a month. We'll do 180.
180 a month? So 180 million a year? Or what? 180 times 12. We're 180, so that's a big number. Right? Does that impress people? Right?
Numbers.
You might say accuracy, team accuracy. When I put that, no, the next thing I would go with budget, annual budget of, fill in the blank. What do you have? So 100,000?
Yeah, about $600,000.
$600,000. Manage team of 6 people. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? This impresses me. I was talking with Sue Lynn the other day about what her piece would be. Reporting to the manager of imaging distribution and cash control. Team responsible for how many 100,000 of documents?
Like,
700,000 documents, comma, responsible for how many billions of dollars of variable annuity? $2.3 billion of variable annuity money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Big numbers. You got 15 seconds, folks. You're not lying. So again, if you feel uncomfortable saying, in this case, Bill is responsible for this, but if you say team responsible for, you can throw something in there about quality. I might put something there, team quality is, I'm not sure I put it here, I might put the bullet points. You're going to see how the whole thing looks out. But, this is true but boring. True but boring. In some places it's off. But this really hits what you were responsible for. Now, some of you might not know all those details. That's what you got to talk to your managers about. Some of you definitely might not know your details of past jobs. I would recommend you try to figure out something that makes sense, that you're not totally lying about. But that is what's going to get people's attention.
If you're the one processing those, can you, instead of
Yep.
just individual as opposed to team?
Team processed.
Well, he would use team because he's a manager. I'm the processor. I'm the one
Exactly.
who's processing $5 million,
Exactly.
whatever.
And if your individual stuff, we'll talk about that. I mean, eventually, underneath here, I know the team's at 98.5%, so let's assume you're at 99%. Quality rating of 99 point blah, 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 blah. If you're better than the team, you put team average was 98.5. If not, how many did I process a day, on average? You have all those numbers for Scanpro, folks. You know how much, the cleaners know how much, I know you guys, the cleaners, hated me when we talked about weighing stuff. Hated me. But you guys have that information now. I clean on average 2.6 pounds per day. The team averages 1.8 pounds per day. You're that much better than the average. How many items have you indexed? You guys know that. How many items have you batched? How many items have you processed in broker services? What is your percentage of productivity? You guys know all that information. And you put down the great stuff, and you kind of don't put aside not so great stuff, and you're talking way through when you're finally in front of somebody. Okay? So almost every one of you should start off with something like that. Mine starts off with reporting to the chief operating officer. That sounds damn good. I don't report to him anymore because he's gone, but it's still going to be on my resume, reporting to the chief operating officer. Because at one point I did for a long period of time. Any questions on any of this? Examples of education. Anyone want to tell me? Someone new want to tell me about examples of education?
MBA.
MBA?
MBA, University of Bridgeport.
Okay.
I put the year.
You don't necessarily have to put the year.
Yeah, I'm getting old. Maybe
Yeah. MBA, University of Bridgeport.
And then Bachelor of Science, Finance, University of Connecticut.
Okay.
And I think I'm in stores.
Okay. For those of you obviously not going to college, you're going to, you may or may not decide to put that down there in terms of where your high school education was. You might decide if you didn't go to college, you might want to completely leave it off. If you're going to school, like Suling, like Lorena, you want to put down there. If you've gotten an associate's degree, you want to put that down there, like Kathy. If you know you're going for your bachelor's degree, expected graduation date of May of 2005, December 2006. Employers like to see that you're doing things to better yourself outside of work. So you got to make your decision on that. GPA, sometimes you put it down. Sometimes you might just put down if you graduate with honors, magna cum laude, summa cum laude. That's just as good if you don't want to come out with the exact number. And
Did you just say not to go high school on the
you might choose not to. If that was your only education, again, depending on the rest of your resume, you just might not put it down there. I mean, they're going to realize.
Make them think they do.
Yeah, they're not even going to college.
But no, would it make them think they do finish next?
I don't
want people thinking.
I don't do that. I'm not sure. I tend to doubt that. If you put it down there, they're going to know you didn't go to college. I mean, 99.5% of the people in the world are high school diploma.
And you're going to fill that out in the application.
You're going to fill out an application.
So it's not like they're not going to see it.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. Thank you. Okay, the last one I want to talk about is the other piece. Publications, professional memberships, community leadership, volunteer activities. Come on, give me some volunteer activities.
Birmingham Foundation Board.
Say that again?
Birmingham Foundation Board.
Oh, I'm not sure a bunch of people have that one. Birmingham Foundation.
What the heck is that?
It's a non-profit company, organization that has services for domestic violence and mentally ill, and does a lot of service.
Any other nonprofits that people have volunteered for?
I was a treasurer for the Heart Association.
Heart Association. Any mentors? Mentoring program? Junior Achievement? Big Brother, Big Sister?
Well, I did stuff that I've not put on resume as working with an orphanage in Zimbabwe, Africa. It's kind of so far removed.
Did you go to Zimbabwe?
No, but video production work. I worked on writing brochures and website information.
You're volunteering. I don't know why I wouldn't put that in there. Someone else raise their hand.
Like assistant Brownie Troop leader?
Assistant Brownie Troop Leader? Definitely. Anyone coach? Anyone coach your kids in Little League? Softball? What? John does. So any coaching?
How about leadership roles in religious organizations can sometimes more be detrimental, depending on who's reading it, can look at it negatively. Like,
I might put, so what was your leadership role?
Well, I facilitated women's group studies, and it was like 15 women that you were responsible for a year. It was coaching, it was mentoring, it was facilitating.
Okay, facilitating women's group studies, or,
It was actually called BSF International. And I've left it off because I know that for some managers, they don't look at it as a positive.
what was it
They
called?
think you're going to come in.
What's it called?
It's BSF International stands for Bible Study Fellowship. But I just use BSF International. It is an international thing. There is accountability, there is training involved, there is,
You might just go BSF International Facilitator. You know, 6 of 1 half dozen the other. It's not as radical as some other things that you could put on your resume.
well, and I think it's a thing of, do you need it? If you're really looking, if you have space, but if you don't have the space, I would not
Again,
go
you're
into
trying-
2
you're trying to show-
pages for
You're trying to show
something.
leadership, you're trying to show ability to manage. I mean, again, it depends what kind of job you're looking for.
And there's also Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, anyone else do Toastmasters?
And I also held roles in there.
Not many volunteers, okay, any professional, what?
How current does it have to be? Does it have to be now or to be past?
Well, your past isn't that long. Yeah, him jealous. I've been around for 20-something years in life. I've been around double that, so, just, you're trying to remember, you're trying to impress somebody that you have leadership or you've gotten involved with. Professional memberships?
Help Professional Videographer Association and wedding and event, but it's totally inapplicable for the type of work that I'm moving into.
You might not put it in.
Right.
FBLA,
FBLA, what's that stand for?
Future Business Leaders.
That's a good one. That's a really good
TMI.
one. What's that, Loma? Limera? Do you have Limera?
TMI.
What was that?
TMI.
PMI?
Project Management.
Yep, Project Management Institute.
CDIA,
CBIA? What's that?
Certified Document Imaging Architect.
That's an interesting one. I'd spell that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
NWBA,
NWBA?
National Women's Business Association.
That's a good one. NWBA?
Doing it now.
Black.
What would you do if you were a former member of like the ACLI committee or something like that?
ACLI committee, what
Former
dates?
member.
What dates on it? 1987 to 1992. You're still president, you want to put 1987 as president, but if you're, put the dates on there. Show that you've gotten involved. Volunteer activities, publications, community leadership.
When you get to a certain age, do you leave off stuff? Like earlier in my career, I put stuff in high school as far as being a class vice president and awards won there, but when you get past a certain age, I think it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I wouldn't be putting a lot of high school awards. I mean, we brushed over awards, but again, Achieve Awards, Heart and Soul Awards, Spot, what was the other award program we had here? I mean, I put all this down there. Team awards that you guys have been involved with. You were a part of the imaging distribution cash flow control team that won the quarterly award and blah, 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 blah.
What about GPAs for education? At some point you leave those out?
At some point, I'll leave those out. I mean, it's not my current one, but I think I'm going to take that off and put magna cum laude instead. But, well, it depends again. As a teacher, when I go out networking, I'm going to ask the advice. Do you put a GPA down there? Because obviously it's a pretty good GPA for the major I want to be teaching. So,
Do you talk about awards, like scholarships as well?
yep, could be. Especially if you're just coming out of school. The newbie's just coming out of school, you want to put things that you did in college. For us old people, we don't put those things out there anymore.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, like I have, because this is from over 10 years ago, honors for business school and high school, the scholarship.
You're probably get away with it. You're still young enough. Dean's list.
How far do you go back as far as jobs if you've been in the workforce 20 years?
As far back as you think you need to show your prospective employer that you can do what you want to do.
Well, part of my problem is one of the first things that I did out of business school was very applicable to this industry, but it was in the 80s.
I'd want to put that down there then, wouldn't I?
We should shoot.
I mean, again, you might
In between discotheque.
I mean, you might have a lot down there for something that was 15, 20 years ago, and then you might have sketchiness. You're gonna say what you did,
Right.
and maybe what things might be applicable to what you want to do, but it's not going to be as big as what you did before, and then you're trying to tell a story of where you're going. Okay, I'm gonna, any other questions?
I have one. I actually, before I came to Candy, I worked at Fleet Bank. That was the last bank, and it was multiple mergers. And I actually put them all just, Fleet Bank, Shawmut Bank, Connecticut National, and then Seymour Trust Company. And I just put the date I started and the date I ended it, and I didn't go into the details, just knowing that it was mergers, it was the same, it was all the same job. Is that appropriate?
I mean, again, you want to show that you want to show you were there for, what was it, 15, 16 years?
16.
I mean, if you put, it depends on how it looks, but I would put, what was the last company?
The last one was Fleet Bank.
So I would probably start off with Fleet Bank, and I'd put all the years. So I'd say Fleet Bank, Seymour, Connecticut, Ansonia, Connecticut. And I know you only went with Fleet for like a year or two? A year at the most?
I don't really remember.
So you were at the whole place from when to when?
I started in 1982 and I ended in 98.
98. So I think I'd put all that down there, and I might put underneath it an asterisk, also known as, formerly known as,
Okay.
boom, boom, and boom. And then you can put, you were the manager, and then here's what my responsibilities were, and then I was associate manager, and here's what, then I was a minor peon, and then I was less than a minor peon. Because you want to show that you, in 16 years, you moved up. So that's, I think, what I would do. Okay, the next piece, slide 3. Yes, ma'am.
When you're going through like the interview process, and sometimes you're sitting there and you're constantly asking, well, tell me about what you did on this job. Give me more information about what you did on this job. Does that mean that you didn't thoroughly explain it on your resume?
No, they want to test you to make sure you actually did what you said you did.
Okay. And how do you prefer to present?
Right.
Okay.
You shouldn't, again, it shouldn't be a book on your resume. It's just kind of a high level, here's what I can do for you type of thing. Again, blind date, his date. Now you're on the date. Now you're trying to see if there's any romance there. Okay, the next set of slides are going to be the most important set of slides for your resume. As you notice, we talked about mainly just facts on the handout A and what we talked about for the first half hour here. Mainly just facts. What's your name? What's your date of where you live? What's your email address? What are your responsibilities? Now we're going to talk about all those great things you got and all your great performance appraisals and turn them into something that's going to tell a future employer that you want to hire you, or they want to hire you. So the next steps are talking about major accomplishments. And we go back to the fun acronym SMART format. So for some of the folks that are brand new here, because there are some newbies here, what does SMART stand for?
Specific.
Specific. Measurable.
Agreed upon.
Agreed upon.
Realistic.
Realistic.
Timely.
Oh, you guys learned it after 5 years. Timely. Time element. Mark, you just lost that. You just lost a couple of demerits there. Okay, the key part of, matter of fact, you do have a handout that I passed out. Starts off with credit customer service management. I did get some feedback from last class that the handouts I sent you guys were more quote-unquote executive, senior leaders, and I already had this already planned out. But the next 6 pages that you have here are literally things that would either be from customer services, IT/technical, and project management /technical. Okay? And as you can note by what I just handed out to you, again, as you can see from the top, basic information, instead of six specific competencies, they got, God bless you, 15 or so, 10 to 15 competencies. But what we're going to talk about today is what says career achievements. Because what we want to talk about is major accomplishments that are career achievements that fall into the verb, noun type of a statement. That are active to action type words that really show how you brag about what kind of things that you've accomplished. Okay? Obviously, we need to be honest when we're doing all that sort of stuff. And obviously, we also need to be able to give examples of information for what you have here. So let's look at the first one in front of us, customer services management. And let's kind of quickly review some of these career achievements. So again, on some of these items, they're talking about specific numbers. So on the first one, 94% current status. First one again, last line, customer generated credits recovering 88%. Second one is talking about, Fortune 500 companies. Here's some specific Fortune 500 companies. The fourth one down talks about customer complaints dropped 50%. Retention of customers with problems increased from 55 to over 93%. Specific details of what's going on here. The only thing I semi-disagree with is starting off with what their title was. Because again, you're depending on what type of format you already have, you might have already put your title there and who you reported to. So again, what things did you accomplish? Starting off with a very strong verb. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead to page 5, I believe it is. And then we're going to come back to page 4. So, list of types of action verbs, okay? I produced, I processed, okay? So some of the folks in imaging, distribution, and CAD control, some of the folks in broker services, some of the folks in claims. A lot of you folks should start off with processed. How much did you process? What was the quality of what you processed individually? Obviously, the strongest statements are going to be what you've done individually. The next strongest statements are what you've done individually compared to what the average was, especially if you were higher than the average of your team. The third type of statement, if you were below average, is you might want to put more things about what the team average. Okay? And you'll have the team won awards. But again, obviously, you're balancing that off with what's, people are going to possibly read between the lines. So, you're balanced, right? I try to get some words out there that I knew that some of the folks are doing. So imaging does balancing. Imaging does indexed. Implement, for those of you who've done projects. Right? Carolyn's done projects. A lot of senior managers, some of the managers have implemented projects. You've implemented this. Quality reviewed. Reduced, if you reduce expenses. I'm looking at Maureen because Maureen's an expert at reducing expenses. Reducing errors. Okay? Show the exact specifics of what you've done. Some of you, and I'm looking at Lisa, trained. Right? Trained this many people in this to improve this process by this much. Okay? You didn't just train somebody. You didn't just train 20 people. I trained them, and here's what the results were of that training. You always want to put the results. You always want to be specific. You always want to have measurable pieces in there. You want, if you can, put some time element in there over the course of a quarter, over the course of a year, over the course of time. Okay? So again, looking at some of the stuff down here, headed. Some of you folks might have headed up project teams or the mail and distribution task forces. You might have headed up task forces. Did you launch a new product? Were you responsible for being on a project team, launched a new product, and launched a new process? David, you launched some new things with the tax through the system, the AS400 system. You want to put some things in there about what you launched. For those of you who wrote policies and procedures, I know a lot of you wrote policies and procedures. Wrote these policy procedures in order to have consistency, in order to increase quality, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So you have some examples in here in all three of these areas that you can review on your own. The key thing I want you to look at is the better examples here actually talk about the dollars or the time saved. Again, the last one, project management, the first one talks about $500 million annually. Okay, that jumps out at me. The fourth bullet point, 23 districts including 4,500 technicians. The fifth bullet point, achieve 250% of sales objective. Okay, those are things that are going to jump out to prospective employers. The more specific you can get, the higher the numbers you can get. And your managers right now can help you by going back and looking at past results of each of those past teams. Any questions on any of this? This is the bread and butter. This is the stuff that I recommend you sit down with your partner for when I give you your homework assignment. And I really want to see some examples next week when we talk about it, because I'm expecting some of you to go, oh yeah, I did that, and be able to steal from other people's examples. Because when Sue Ling and I talked about it for about 10, 15 minutes earlier in the week, late last week, she was like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about putting that down. Or I could have put it down this way, or I could have wrote it down this way. And that's why I started off with the 6 different ways that we all work for American Scania Prudential Financial Company. the more consistent you guys can be and learn from each other, the better your resume is going to look. Okay. Resume dues. A lot of you folks know this stuff because you saw it on both the examples from last week and the examples from this week. Use bullets. Use action words. Use short words. You don't have to impress people with long words. In fact, some of the people you might be interviewing with might not understand what the word is. So, you don't necessarily want to make he or she sound stupid. Use spell check. How many people have interviewed somebody else here at American Scandia for a job here at American Scandia? How many people have seen typos on resumes? How many people have thought those people must be complete idiots to have typos on their resumes? Don't be one of those idiots, okay? Have your partner review it, go through spell check on Word, have your family review it. Don't make mistakes. You could use sentence fragments. A lot of folks make the mistake of having to come out with, believing that they need to come up with a fully great punctuated sentence. And you need to have a verb, you need to have a noun, but you don't need to have a complete sentence. You start off with responsible for, that's not a great way. Usually it's I am responsible for, that's a proper sentence, or we were responsible for. Take out the I's, take out the we's, responsible for. So you can have sentence fragments. And you want to try to get as much information into as few words as possible. We're going to be writing several drafts, okay? You got the first part of Part A draft this week. Next week you're going to get the second part, Part A and Part B. You're probably going to have several drafts after that, even after we'll pass the class. I'm sure some of you are going to go, well, I did it this way. Can you show me? Or can you review my resume? So expect to write several drafts. That's okay. Matter of fact, even after you leave here, when you go to that 2-day seminar, they might you might see something else you like, and it's a different draft. When you go sit down and talk to people when you're networking, they might come up with another idea, which might be a third draft. So where your resume is going to be a living, breathing document. It never really becomes final. And again, the most important part is please quantify with specific numbers. You all have some specific numbers, because I've been beating up your management team, my management team, for years and years to do SMART objectives. Specific numbers, what percentages, what amounts, what have you saved, what dollars. The bigger the numbers, the better. That's why I started off with $2.3 billion that cash control area is processing. And anyone on that team, Imaging Distribution Cash Control, is responsible for making sure that works. Claims, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Broker services. Some of the folks have saved, the renewal team has saved hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I'm trying to find Tracy. There she is. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year sending out these things that they're going nuts for. But that's part of saving money. Broker services. You could say you appointed this many investment professionals, which led to this much dollars in new business last year. You and I both know it's a bunch of crap because only 15% of those people you did actually send in money. But if you put in, how many we were doing, 100 a day? So that's 20,000 a year. We appointed 20,000 investment professionals to American Scandia Life Insurance Company, which led to this much in variable annuity business in 2003. It's got to be, what, 2-point-something billion? That's right, because they got that much money. 2 points. So we're talking about somewhere in the $2 billion range. Large amounts. And now what individual pieces have you done to make that happen? We gave you a list of action verbs. Okay, resume don'ts. I also gave you a handout called the Top 10 Resume Lies. Okay? The top 10 resume lies are what the managers are seeing. So, I'd be very careful to make sure you're not putting down incorrect dates. Make sure this is not part of the resume. You don't usually put it inflated salary history, but you will put salary down most likely when you're signing the application. Don't lie about that. False education level. For those of you who are football fans, University of Notre Dame, George McCleary, does that? So this guy gets hired from, I think it was from Georgia Tech, goes to University of Notre Dame. He's going to be the head coach of the University of Notre Dame football team. And somewhere years ago, he put down he got his second master's, or he got, he did this, and someone in the press box checked it. Found out he never got it. He was forced to resign and was fired within a week. Anything you put down that's a lie, especially on your application could be used for grounds for immediate dismissal, like that. So be careful. Non-existent awards and/or recognition, unexplained gaps between jobs. That just needs to be explained. I mean, you could have gaps between jobs, you could have gone back and been a parent, as a stay-at-home parent, you could have been unemployed for some period of time. But let's make sure you have the ability to explain those gaps. So what are the resume don'ts? Don't lie. I think you've seen it several times. Be honest, don't lie. They will catch you. You can stretch the truth. You can play around with it a little bit, but don't out and out lie. Don't put a skill in that you don't have at least one example for. How many times have I said that in the last 2 weeks? Don't include references. In the old days, you say, references, you either refurbish upon request, or they actually would write out something. Don't put anything about references. Everyone knows you have references. It's a given. It's a given like you have a high school education. So I wouldn't put anything in there about references. Don't use the pronoun I. I did this, I did that. Just, start off with a fragmented sentence. Responsible for, getting back to the one from the action words that we talked about in the last slide. Decreased this, negotiated this, not I negotiated, not I decreased. You don't have to use the pronoun I there at all. Don't include personal information, married, 2 kids. No, you see that in resume. I wouldn't include that at all. First off, it's illegal for them to ask you about it. Secondly, it just really is irrelevant to you finding a job or not. And again, I would not leave off employment dates. Again, you might not want to put the exact October to, you might not want to put the months in there, but I would definitely want to make sure you put all the years in there as to where you work from here to there. And most of you, if I'm looking around the room, have worked here at least 2 to 3 years, except you. You've been 2 to 3 weeks. Your history's not as good. So, again, and someone like Diane who's worked here for 5 or 6 years and 16 years before, so she's showing a very stable history of working at 1 or 2 jobs. Any questions on resume don'ts? Appearance counts. As we talked about several times, proofread your resume. Okay? Again, I handed out this resume, you have 6 resumes in your hands. I'd be very surprised to see if you see any sort of typos there. Okay? You want to make sure you proofread that resume. Have your buddy proofread the resume, have your family proofread the resume. Use quality paper. People will ask me, we started asking that this last week or the week before, what should I use for paper, what should I use for cover letters? And we will talk about cover letters in several weeks. You want to use good quality stationery for resumes, and you want to use, in my opinion, and the opinion of several books I've read, you want to use white. Okay, sometimes people use kind of dark white, but you want to use classic white. The resume paper should be crisp with a rag cotton fiber type of quality. For cover pages to go along with that, they are suggesting that you use a different color. So you might use an off-white or a light blue. They're also suggesting that you might want to use a different size paper. And what they recommended in a couple of books I read was something called the Monarch size, which is about 7 1/4 by 10.5 inches, so that you can see a cover page here, and behind it you see the resume. Okay? Again, I'm going to talk to you about cover letters just because I know you have to use them every once in a while. But as I'm going to tell you through our networking classes and some of the other classes, I'm not going to recommend you going hog wild with cover pages. But in either case, you want to use black ink. You don't want to use any other funky color ink. And I would use a laser printer, the highest quality printer. In the old days, you used to have to go off to a print shop and actually get your resume printed up by printers. Now, with laser printing and the ability to do things, here, and work as well as at home, the quality of your resume is going to look fine just by printing it out here without going and spending extra money where you don't need to spend extra money. They talk about using standard fonts, especially for electronic scanning. Kat talked a little about electronic scanning last week. These are the fonts they recommend for electronic scanning: the Helvetica, Optima, Times, or New York, somewhere between 10 and 14 point. I don't know, that's what it said. I'm not sure.
Is it really New York?
Might be a typo.
Times New York.
I think it's Times New York. It's Times New York.
Times New Roman.
Times New York. There's a typo there. Oh my God! Typo! I have a typo.
And now I'll tell them, I asked many times, you want me to proofread this? No, it's fine.
Times, I screwed up. Thanks for catching me. At least some of you are awake.
Why is the Arial on there?
I don't know.
You think it should be?
No, it definitely wasn't one they recommended for electronic scanning.
Wow.
There's a standard set that is usable, but, you know, kind of across the board.
Yep.
But if you're using outside of that, it may come out as, you know,
Yep.
invisible.
Yep.
The other thing is, people receiving it can have a different medium of reading it, and it changes your fonts.
So people could change your fonts if people are receiving it, yep, if you send it electronically. That happens every once in a while. It happens a lot less now than it did several years ago. Because everyone has Word. Obviously, the other big problem is, do they have the right version of the software you're sending it? I think almost everyone here has Word, either uses it at work or uses it at home. But if you're at Word 2004, and they have Word 95 on their computer, they're not going to get it the way you're sending it. Do you worry about that? I don't think you worry about it. I think they call back and they say we didn't get it, and you have to save it in a Word 95 document and send it out to them.
What about PDF? Is that commonly recommended?
I haven't heard one way or the other. PDF is probably pretty acceptable since you could download something off the internet to read it. I wouldn't see why that would be bad. The nice thing about PDF is people can't change anything you put in there. But not everyone has the ability to create PDFs. You have to have the special software to make that happen. I would recommend using 2 pages. If you're talking about squeezing something onto one, you want to make sure it's easily read. If it's very small font, everything's squeezed on one, it doesn't come across that well. For guidelines for margins, I would use 1.5 inches on the top and the sides, and about 3/4 inches on the bottoms. That's what I would recommend. I'm reading some books today, some research on it. I'm not an expert in all this stuff. I'm not sure if Lynn does that.
Can you say that again? 1 1/4 top?
1.5 inches on the top and the sides, 3/4 inches on the bottoms. And again, these are just guidelines. I mean, if you have to do an inch here, half an inch here or there to fit it on one page, no one's going to take out a ruler and go, oh, this was only an inch, they're going to throw this resume out. They might throw it out for other reasons, but it's not going to be because your margins are a little bit off. But you can always blame it on it. If you feel like you're not getting jobs, you can always blame it on it. Anything else with appearance? Okay, homework. This is going to be one of your most difficult assignments. Resume worksheet B. As you can see, there's a lot of room on resume worksheet B, William. A lot of lines here, okay? Because I know you write so large. As a matter of fact, I would also recommend going to the copy machine and also maybe making a few more copies for each of you, because hopefully you folks have several accomplishments with several companies. I've given you the ability to have 4 different companies and 3 different accomplishments with each company. Okay? So if you want to, you might want to go to the copy machine in case you screw up and you don't have a pencil and you want to play around with it. But I recommend you start off with your current company, your current position, and you go with the verb noun statement. Okay? You look at those 6 resumes that you have in front of you, and you try to figure out what specific, measurable, with a time element pieces you can put in there. And I gave you a lot of hints. Numbers of things you indexed, numbers of things you produced, numbers of things you worked on. Quality. You should have one in there for quality. If you have the ability to measure it, you should have things in there for the different types of production. If you've got folks who are doing more than one production, Sulaim and Imaging, they're doing cash balancing, they're doing indexing, they're doing cleaning, they're doing scanning. Broker services, you do quite a few things. Claims, you do everyone's doing quite a few things.
So everyone should have accomplishments, right?
If you don't have accomplishments, you guys might as well just decide not to find a job.
All right, I'm out of here.
Okay? You guys all should have accomplishments. If you worked on project teams, if you've headed up project teams, you've worked on project teams. I'm looking at Carrie. Carrie's worked on the re-engineering project for broker services. That better be on her list. Okay, the things that Janice and Margaret do all the time for integration. You know how many things I'm looking around, people worked on integration teams, figure out how to get those things into numbers. Even people are doing basic hunting and tackling and kicking and etc. You all have data. You all have information because I've been beating up your people to get that information. You all have the monthly snapshot that talks about team results. So if you can't find individual results, you have team results. Work for the team and hit 100% of their goals. These 5 goals. It's best you spit out those 5 goals. So if worst comes to worst, You should have some of that stuff in there. Again, remember, individual's best, right? This is what I've done. Next best is what the team's done. Okay? But individual is what's best. So I want you to fill out resume worksheet B. I want this to be completely filled out, 2 pages. Shows me how much you've done. For as many companies as you can. Obviously, going back to some of the other companies you might have some problems with, you might want to think through, you might want to see if you have any old performance appraisals from them, and you want to fill it out with SMART objectives. Then I want you to take resume worksheet A and resume worksheet B, and actually use the resume format you decided to work on, and type in draft 1 of your resume. And I want you to bring 2 copies.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I want you to use last week's homework assignment, resume worksheet A, and this week's homework assignment, resume worksheet B, and I want you to type up a first draft of your resume. And I want 2 copies of it.
Not of 2 different styles.
And I want it on individual sides. I do not want it front to back. Do not want it front to back, but I want 2 copies of individual resumes. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with them. You're going to hold 1 copy in your hand, and you're going to hand in 1 copy to me. And next week, we're going to have an overhead projector, and we're just going to talk through some of the good things and the bad things that each of you have done, so that everyone can learn from everyone else's issues. Because I know some of you guys are worried about getting embarrassed, but again, I'd much rather you guys embarrass yourselves in front of friends than embarrass yourselves in front of that job that you really, really want, but you screwed up because you made a typo, or because you can't explain something about your resume. So I think it's really important that we actually see what things are going on for everyone. Because, again, we just had 6 different companies, and we all worked for the same company. I think that's hysterical. Any questions about the homework assignment? Any questions about anything we did today? Have a great week.